Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are currently making our way inbound towards the excellent freeware Duxford Airport by Chico Mick. As you can see, we are currently on foot, and that's no trick of editing this time, as is often the case in my videos. Instead, we are actually able here to freely move around within Microsoft Flight Simulator in first person, a functionality that I think has been long overdue. It is worth mentioning though, straight off the bat, that unfortunately this isn't a default functionality, which I definitely think it should be, but instead we're making use of one of FS Realistic's newest features. FS Realistic now offers the ability to both walk and run in both first and third person within Microsoft Flight Simulator, and whilst technically the mode is still in a beta state, it is now available with version 2.1 of the product, so I thought we'd take a look at the functionality here today. This new mode is undoubtedly great to have, though far from perfect. We'll run through what it offers, how it works, and any drawbacks. We're currently heading out towards the apron here at Duxford, towards the British Airliner collection. There's actually an imposter here on the flight line today, and we'll be taking a look at that in just a moment's time. But as always, ladies and gents, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. So, a British airline we may well be looking at here, but certainly not a British airliner. We're going to be using FS Realistic's first-person mode here to carry out a quick walk-around of the Leonardo Mad Dog. I chose the aircraft simply because, as you can see, I've had another excellent British Midland livery recreated for the MD-82. Not historically accurate per se, since Midland never flew the MD-80 family, but they did fly the DC-9, and obviously the two aircraft are incredibly similar. Anyway, I thought the walk-around would afford us a good opportunity here to showcase the livery. You can find that available over on flightsim.to as well, and I'll leave a link down in the video description below. Obviously, you've already seen the walking functionality there to some degree during the introduction. We'll just take a quick look at the FS Realistic application once again. We're not going to cover off every feature of FS Realistic in today's video, since I've already reviewed the product previously, and I'll leave a link to that review up above. But in terms of the first-person mode, bringing up the program, you can see we do have a series of options. And again, worth noting that this particular mode is still in a beta phase, so it could well be that we'll see changes along the way. Nevertheless, the functionality is currently available if you download version 2.1 of FS Realistic. And again, you can see it states that these settings are currently experimental. Firstly, we have the option to assign a button to toggle the first-person mode on or off. In my particular case, for what it's worth, I went for the K key. Similarly, we have the ability to assign a button to a flashlight, quite useful obviously if it's dark later on. There are some limitations with the first-person mode, and again we'll discuss those as we carry out the walk-around. You also have the option to show an avatar. It uses the default Microsoft Flight Simulator pilot models. Again though, clearly still in a very experimental phase at the moment, the avatar is not animated correctly. Essentially you can float around at the correct height, but with your arms outstretched it looks rather strange. We won't be taking a look at that today. And just below that we have the option to choose the avatar, so again all based on the default Microsoft Flight Simulator pilot models. The sounds volume, personally I prefer to have that cranked all the way up. That's associated with the footstep noises, the noises of the avatar moving. Camera movements and mouse sensitivity I've just left as default, but certainly you can adjust those as well. There are some other camera options via the settings page, and I have tried to fiddle around with those, but currently those don't seem to have any effect on the first person mode. As you may perhaps notice in just a moment's time, at the minute I find the first person mode to be a little bit too zoomed out. There doesn't seem to be a setting to adjust that currently. Anyway, the mode is pretty simple to use. Firstly you just hit your toggle button. To walk around it's the W, S, D and A keys. Holding down shift will have your avatar run, which is quite useful of course if you want to cover some distance. And very nicely as well, running does actually change both the camera movements and the associated sounds. If you want to speed up or slow down in terms of your walking speed, you can left or right click on the mouse. And finally, if you want to adjust the camera height or the avatar height, you can use the mouse wheel. So pretty straightforward to use, as I say, obviously quite similar in some respects to the drone camera. The advantage I would say of this first person mode is that firstly of course you don't have to adjust the drone camera up and down to maintain a height. And also the associated camera movements and sounds do add to the immersion. It does make it feel much more like you're walking around as opposed to floating. Anyway, that's a brief overview of the available settings. We'll obviously take a look now at the functionality in a little bit more depth. So once again we're just going to carry out a quick walk around here of the MD-82. We'll discuss the functionality in a little bit more detail and work our way through both its positives and its negatives. So we have now entered the first person walk around mode, and the first thing you may notice is there's a bit of a reduction in visual clarity. Firstly, a little bit of jerkiness in the camera, that does ease off once you start moving. Secondly, I've had to dial back the anti-aliasing here towards TAA. If you try and use walk around mode with DLSS, you get some pretty poor visual artifacts. And generally speaking, the clarity is much reduced as opposed to using the drone cam. Anyway, as I say, we'll work our way around the aircraft here briefly, just taking a look at both the livery and discussing some of the product detail as we go. Firstly, in terms of the benefits, it's certainly a very easy method of walking around the aircraft. You can use the mouse to point you in whichever direction you want, and then just using the W, A, S and D keys to move around as you would in most first-person games. Similarly, we can walk and run. You'll notice as well there are nice sounds associated with walking, some nice camera movements as well. And the same is true of running. If we try and run, you'll see slightly more exaggerated camera movements. You'll notice different sounds as well. In terms of limitations, visual clarity is certainly one for me, and you can only realistically run the sim in TAA using the walk around mode, otherwise you do have some, again, pretty significant visual artifacting. The avatar as well, as I mentioned earlier, it can be displayed, but currently you'll just see a floating avatar. It's not correctly animated, which does look rather odd, so I prefer to turn that off. Similarly, I feel things are a little bit zoomed out currently. As it stands, it seems as though the camera controls can't be used to zoom in or out. I suspect we'll see that at a later date. Also, using the walk around mode, there is a slight drop in FPS, noticeable I would say. It's around 0 to 15 FPS, but I would say it seems to be more towards the 15 FPS end of the spectrum. Other than that, sloped ground can be a bit of an issue for the walk around mode. It can lead to some unusual height differences as well as aircraft attitude differences if you have, for example, a tail wheel. You'll notice as well external sounds. You actually hear the avionics sounds from the aircraft externally, which isn't too dramatic, but it does sound a little bit strange at times. And lastly, you do get some aircraft texture issues. For example, on the Phoenix Airbus A320, you'll get black textures. So currently the walk around mode is far from perfect, but again it is currently in a beta state, so I'm sure we'll see improvements. Anyway, just a quick walk around there. Hopefully, of course, you enjoyed both the views of the aircraft and the Midland livery. So there you go guys, I hope you enjoyed our brief look at the new FS Realistic functionality. Again, I think it's really nice to have a first-person mode within the sim, and whilst the implementation still could use some work, I think that is probably down to sim limitations. It looks as though the FS Realistic dev probably had to get fairly creative to bring us the first-person functionality. Hopefully a few more workarounds can be found to give us, for example, a properly animated avatar, better anti-aliasing. Hopefully we can cut down as well on the jerky movements and the loss of FPS. I think for now I'd probably still shy away from using first-person mode in any video content, since the lower resolution does detract a bit visually. But certainly if I'm simming in my own time and I want to carry out a bit of a walk around or perhaps check out some scenery, then the functionality is very easy to use and I think absolutely perfect for the job. Once again, also the first-person mode is currently in a beta state, so I'm sure we'll see further improvements to its functionality overall. Again, also a little opportunity here to showcase the new British Midland livery to you. For anyone who wants that, I'll leave a link down in the video description below. And once again, a very big thank you to Mr. Mac2 for all of his excellent efforts. Anyway, a nice quick video for you here today, but hopefully it gives you a little bit of a heads up as to version 2.1 of FS Realistic. Certainly well worth downloading if you are a current user of the product. On the other hand, if you've yet to purchase FS Realistic and you're still on the fence about whether or not to do so, obviously this new added functionality gives you one more reason to consider buying the product. Once again guys, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please consider subscribing as well. And a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons. I do hope that all of you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.